Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Radio Visca. Today's episode is about the ongoing war against Germany. So many imagine that in 1945 the war was over and Germany became an ally of the United States, or at least the West did. And this sort of sentiment was just for the Antifa. No tears for Krauts. If you recognize the guy, that's Bomber Harris, who orchestrated the absolutely genocidal bombings of Berlin and Hamburg and many other cities in Germany. Or books like this, Germany Must Perish, where the forced sterilization of all Germans was advocated in 1941, by the way. I believe before America had even entered the war against Germany. Or just propaganda images depicting Germans as apes with big clubs. This was all in the past. Now Germans are the friends, the allies of America, and all that ever happens is good things. Many nations, especially the United States, England, etc., somehow still feel threatened by Germany. And I just wanted to give a few examples of that. And then maybe talk a little bit about why this is and what's happening there. So I've just picked some random things that kind of came to mind. I certainly think there's many more examples in Stereotypes. There's a whole number of jokes. There's a whole number of ways of denigrating a people, but certainly I think they really happen with all nations. There's jokes and stereotypes about all people. Just wanted to pick some things that are specifically pertinent today. So the first one, in my opinion, is Dieselgate. And I believe Dieselgate is an act of economic warfare by the United States against Germany. So what is Dieselgate? Well, Volkswagen was convicted now of jimmying their diesel models, rigging the monitoring software in the diesel models to only give a certain kind of value for, I believe, what are called NOxs, so noxious gases. I mean, these are not nice gases. Under test conditions, but then during normal use, it just run as a normal engine. And I guess this, went against some legislation in the United States. Now, of course, the United States doesn't give a shit about nature or the environment. This is simply the actual regulation in the first place against small diesel engines that were cheap, i.e. Volkswagens, and also French cars, which basically don't have any presence in America at all. That regulation in the first place was a US auto industry attempt at limiting the ability for German companies such as Volkswagen to sell. Now, Mercedes came up with a smart way of dealing with this. They essentially have a very complicated system of spraying ammonia into their exhaust system and neutralizing some of these noxious gases. Volkswagen couldn't afford, because Volkswagens are generally a lower segment car, they're cheaper than Mercedes. Mercedes is for the wealthy, they can afford complicated systems in their car. For Volkswagen, it would not have paid off to implement the system at the price point that their cars are sold at. So, they came up with this harebrained idea of rigging the system. Gosh, I think that's a pretty dumb move by them, and I guess they underestimated the NSA, because I'm not sure how this was found out, but I could imagine that NSA surveillance uncovered this. You know, just emails between various Volkswagen managers, etc. The rule itself, yeah, sure, it's nice to not have these gases, but it's not like petrol cars don't create emissions. It's not like big American diesel trucks don't create these emissions. When you look at the size of the average Volkswagen, the sort of climate footprint, the resource footprint, I mean, the fuel consumption, I mean, it's vastly better than the majority of American cars, let's be honest. So what's happened here? Volkswagen's been forced to buy back 500,000 cars at extremely inflated values. So they're basically going around, and you know, anyone who has any old diesel Volkswagen is running to the dealership and, you know, laughing the way back to the bank with these overinflated $40,000 settlement checks where Volkswagen's buying back all these diesel cars. There's basically 500,000 of them, an incredible fleet of cars that now has to be junked. That's really good for the environment, isn't it? Let's just take 500,000 fuel-efficient, very fuel-efficient cars, relatively small economical cars, and just junk them all. I mean, I think it's almost obvious that this is not about the environment. I mean, just look at these images. This is economic warfare against the German manufacturer. That's what it is, plain and simple. And you know, the reality is American cars suck. They suck. That's why people in America are buying German cars. So, you know, you have to speak to General Motors, the government-owned bankrupt General Motors or Ford, or, I mean, this is just underhanded tactics, right? And, you know, I mean, just to drive back the point, which of these two cars do you think is more friendly to the environment? This Ford, made in America, or this Volkswagen, made in Germany? I'll leave it up to you. Then the second area where I still see a pretty strong, I mean, considering this is 2017, a pretty strong propaganda war against Germans and ethnic Germans and Germany in general is Hollywood. I mean, it is now 2017, and there's still every year Second World War movies depicting the Germans as evil Nazis, normalizing the slaughter of Germans, and basically trying to get the audience to cheer on American bombing and killing of German people in the Second World War, as if there's absolutely no two sides to the story. It's just good to kill Krauts, and we should cheer that and be happy when the Americans win. I mean, if you took any other two groups, if you had, say, Americans fighting Native Americans in that way and made movies like that, I mean, even if you took an event where, say, the Native Americans were doing something really nasty, you know, they were scalping people or whatever, and then you still could not get away with making movies depicting them as the 100% evil to be defeated side. The Hollywood has obviously gotten recent competition or aid, if you want to call it, the propaganda efforts, sort of mutual, and that's video games. And again, Germans are not the only ones that actually, get hammered in video games. I think recently, maybe Arabs and Russians and North Koreans have actually surpassed the Germans, just probably due to current political requirements. But still, every year, every other year at least, there are big major blockbuster titles coming out that glorify World War II, glorify American killing of Germans, and where players the video game players, millions of kids, I mean, like hundreds of millions of kids around the world win the game by shooting at Germans. And I mean, this is just obviously going to lead to certain attitudes. But you know, that's not all. There's also some sort of funnier things, I think. I mean, there's the NSA spying, which, you know, with a Merkel phone, and I mean that sort of strikes me as just, you know, the master keeping track of the puppet. There's the reaction you get at soccer games, at Soccer World Cup, is pretty revealing as well. I mean, just watch a game, a global game, Germany playing against anyone else, and just listen to the crowd. I mean, the boos and the whistling. It's 2017, people, no matter what you think about the Second World War. So that's obviously being fostered somehow. You know, I mean, it's not every nation, but it's this sort of anti-German sentiment is anachronistically still quite strong, I believe. But let's keep maybe in the economic realm. Let's continue to look at the economic realm. You know, it's not just actions such as NSA spying on German corporations, or the Dieselgate Volkswagen buyback scheme that they've been forced in. There's also been fines against German banks by American regulators. I mean, just ridiculous things against France, by the way, as well. I think the biggest aspect, or the biggest assault on German industry, though, however, has been the Russia sanctions. You know, people think, oh, you know, these sanctions against Russia, they're just against Russia. Well, I think they were also aimed at Germany. And I'm not the only person to think this. I'm in sort of good company, because George Friedman of STRATFOR, the, you know, infamous private CIA, I think is a bit of an overstatement, but they certainly have some people, you know, that used to work in the intelligence community. He gave this pretty famous speech, which I'll link to below, where he basically speaks about the American empire's need to constantly separate Germany and Russia economically, because an alliance between Germany and Russia would be the worst outcome for the United States, and really the only real danger to the United States that he sees. So he sees this as far more dangerous than a Chinese-Russian alliance. So I'll link to that video below, and you guys can watch that for yourself. Another area that Germany has been specifically targeted is a different part of the German economy, so not the large corporations, but the smaller and medium-sized businesses. And these actually make up the majority of business in Germany, and they're actually the primary reason for Germany's success on the world stage and its industrial prowess. These businesses in Germany are called the Mittelstand, which kind of means the middle stature. They have been increasingly targeted by Wall Street investment bankers for mergers and acquisitions, as they call it, euphemistically. Basically, what's happening is people come from New York, bankers, they go and try to convince various business owners and small business owners in Germany to sell their business, often for reasonable sums of money. And as soon as they bought the business, they just close it down. That's it. So really what it is a sort of form of, a cartel elimination of competition, right? And yeah, this has been increasing as well. It may not be a hot war against Germany, but as we all know, Germany is still officially occupied by the United States. There's still legal obligations to the occupier. And I think it's obvious that American industry and many industries around the world fear the German competence and the strong German industry that has essentially risen from the ashes after the Second World War. And obviously Germany got quite a boost. Initially it was an expense, but I think at this point in time it's become a boost through the reunification with East Germany. Another way to attack Germany is obviously to just get rid of Germans. And one may ask oneself if that's what's happening with the big migrant crisis now. There obviously were plans in the past, not implemented, but carefully drawn out, such as the Houghton Plan and the Morgenthau Plan, which had envisioned significant, decimation of Germany, of ethnic Germans, of the German population and the German industry. These plans floated around and were considered quite openly. Who's to say they haven't been pulled out? I think in closing, it's important to recognize reality, and that reality is that as the American economy continues to falter due to many, many factors, financial reasons, efficiency reasons, cultural reasons, offshoring, globalization, etc., debt, over-militarization. As the companies find an ever-increasing stiffening in competition against their products from overseas, they will continue or will increasingly lobby the American deep state to come to their aid. And I think you see this sort of covert economic and surveillance war, not only against Germany, but also against other companies. It's lawfare, it's patents, it's legal proceedings, it's buying up companies, closing them, it's trade wars, it's sanctions, a number of things. And I think one may actually include the migrant crisis in this. I mean, if you ask yourself, well, who started the sort of refugee streams? Well, that was America. That was the bombing of Iraq and Syria and Libya. So is it too much of a stretch to sort of imagine that this was intentional? I mean, certainly the attacks were planned, and generally there's a lot of game theory that goes on, a lot of sort of playing out of scenarios of what will happen, and refugees are part of every war, and they just are. And there were warnings by Gaddafi as well about this in advance, and it would sort of fit with other goals that the sort of empire has about Syria, at least, which is a goal of strategic depopulation. So basically depriving Syria of any form of economy, depriving Syria of manpower, depriving Syria of a future. Now, it's obvious that refugees, at least initially, especially when they're from a different country, cost money rather than contributing to an economy. So, I think there's a lot of factors here below the surface that I'd love to hear from you guys about. If you have comments on all this, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe you can point me to some videos, and we can keep talking about this topic.